Dobré odpoledne, ještě jednou zdravím vás všechny tady z FAMU, ze studia FAMU. Měli jsme pro vás krátký klip, nejenom o pivovaru, ale o celé akci, která se tam konala na Radešíně. Stýská se nám po vás, po nějakých takovýchhle akcích, ale jsme rádi, že můžeme aspoň takhle spolu fungovat. Je to vždycky zajímavé i v tom, že na té akci se můžeme zeptat na spoustu věcí přednášejících. Vy teď máte možnost skrze ten chat nějakým způsobem to využíváte, tak to využívejte dále, protože přijde systém, který zabraňuje tomu, abyste ve firmě měli velké množství různých samostatných Tamagotchi. Je to systém, který pomáhá propojovat ty systémy a který napomáhá spolupráci. Ten systém se jmenuje Elements, je z kategorie MAMU, to znamená nástrojů pro zpracování, pro asset management a media asset management. Napomáhá takzvanému low-res editingu, kdy jsme schopni přes web si něco postříhat, jsme schopni nějakým způsobem vybírat videa, zpracovávat je. A hlavně nástroj Elements má integraci se všemi nebo s většinou těch výrobců, o kterých jste dnes již slyšeli. Nativně má s nimi zase propojení. A za firmu Elements je tady Alistair, který bude mít pro vás prezentaci. Alistair, hi, do you hear us?
Yes, I do. Yes, good to speak to everyone today.
Welcome, it's your turn, you can start.
Perfect, thanks very much. So I'm just going to share my screen. And you should see our first slide here. So I'm going to have a short presentation and then show you some of our technology live. First of all, we're going to look at our media library, which is our media assets manager. We're then going to look at our Avid and Adobe integration, and also our StoreNext and Isilon integration, discussing some of the examples. Then an area on remote editing, and then we'll have the demonstration, and hopefully some time for some questions and answers at the end there. So just a quick introduction. I'm Alistair Washbourne, based in the UK, Commercial Director at Elements. Feel free to contact us at any time. I've just dropped the generic email address there, but of course our partner is Agora Plus, so do feel free to speak to them about any of our solutions. So we're Elements. We call ourselves human-centered media storage, and most people who use our systems understand that. And generally our storage becomes the centerpiece of the facility. So rather than just being the storage bucket or the actual storage that we're connected to, we provide the workflow and the day-to-day environment for editors and production management to use. And there are four key areas that we operate in. So the first is in collaboration. So users on the system can view, comment, annotate assets. They can do a browser-based rough cut editing. We also have below that the asset management side. So this is where we can visualize assets, add custom metadata on the fly as well. So we don't have to design what our all the metadata looks like before the actual systems are purchased. And a lot of our systems evolve with our systems, so that we're not particularly prescriptive in our workflow. So what that means is that when we provide a system, a customer can continue exactly as they were in their workflow, but they can use all the tools that we have available, and they generally evolve into a far more efficient and a nice to use workflow. And then underpinning all of that, we have our automation. So particularly for events or for moving content around, or perhaps transcoding content in the background, an approvals process perhaps, all of that can be covered by our automation engine. And that also has its own API and also its own scripting support as well. So we have a fairly simple interface on top, but for customers that wish to get really deeply involved on the automation side, we provide that in nice kind of clear steps without overcrowding the main product. And then underneath all of that, we have our storage management. And whether it's our own storage systems or systems that we're connecting to. So today we're going to be talking about the Quantum StoreNext environments and Isilon environments that we can integrate to. But whatever those systems are, we have the ability to move content around, to send content to the cloud, to visualize it still on the main storage whilst it's in the cloud, for example. So a little bit of introduction to the media library now. So the media library is a media assets management. It's fully integrated within the Elements platform. Being browser-based, it's very easy to use, and you can use it remotely. So all you need is the URL of the system itself. And within the browser, as long as you have access either by VPN or DMZ, then you can browse assets at the proxy level, meaning that you're visualizing the content. You can, as you'll see later, you don't have to touch the actual asset. So it's ideal for remote access where you can visualize, you can comment, you can approve content without actually having to move those raw assets around. So this is what we can do in the media library. There's quite a list here, so I won't go through that complete list, but we will be seeing it shortly in a demonstration. I guess the main point about the media library is that because it's integrated within the storage platform that we're connected to, we don't need to move content to somewhere else like a database. We're visualizing it directly on the storage. So the media library is effectively a window onto the storage itself. So you can continue to use your own folder structure, your own workflows, but the media library is a nice addition that sits on top. So in terms of our storage platform itself, there's several scenarios that we provide. So the first one is Avid. So we can emulate Avid storage, and it's a single click in the interface. And what it does is it emulates Avid storage at the file system level. So once an area of the storage is mounted as a workspace, that's our terminology for actually mounting parts of the storage. Once it's mounted, if you do a properties or a get info on that particular mount, it will actually report back and tell you that it's an Avid file system mount. So that means that Media Composer deals with it completely natively, so that all your bin locking in Media Composer operates correctly. You see the green bin icon. Also, Media Composer writes correctly to the actual storage itself. So all of the folder structure is naturally created by Media Composer, and it also identifies the user and stroke workstation correctly as it writes that data. So you've got true sharing capability within Avid. The main advantage of this is that you don't need to retrain your editors at all. Because it works completely natively as expected. So there's no additional application that's needed that has to run alongside Media Composer. We just use our Elements client, which mounts the storage itself. And then another scenario is Premiere Pro. So with the media library, we also supply the Premiere Pro plugin written by Elements to Premiere Pro standards. And within Premiere Pro, you get a window that looks at the media library, and any XML rough cut that was created in the browser can be clicked from within Premiere Pro and brought into Premiere Pro, and all the assets are linked automatically that it was using, so that you can edit in either the source raw asset or at the proxy level, and you have the choice. And because we create the proxies in the media library, the proxy is downloaded as a cache in the background for Premiere Pro to use. So it's a really efficient way of using Premiere Pro, particularly for users who are remote editing as well. So we have a new program called the Storage Qualification Program. So for quite a while, we've connected to Quantum StoreNext environments. And in fact, at FAMU, that's exactly the environment that we have set up, where we have a couple of our Elements gateways on the front of the quantum storage. But we had a lot of requests to also connect to Isilon. And so we decided to formalize this with our qualification program. So by that, we certify it. Where we can, we use the native APIs to get an improved level of compatibility and functionality as well. So the first one is the quantum StoreNext integration. We've done this for a while, and this is a typical connected scenario. So you can see that you've got the quantum XLS in the middle. You've got on the left-hand side, you've got the fiber channel connected clients, which still remain, or that they can remain, should I say, and you've got your fiber channel fabric. So that's exactly how a StoreNext environment might look. On the right-hand side, you can see that we've got the elements gateway and the worker node. I'll just come back to that. We can have either one gateway or a couple of gateways, which provides high resilience, and the same with the worker nodes. And then they are connected. At the back end, they're connected by fiber channel. At the front end, they're connected via Ethernet to either Media Composer or Premiere Pro or a complete hybrid environment. And all of the tools and the media library that I've talked about so far is then available to that central storage, including the Avid bin locking as well. Now on Isilon, it works a little bit differently. We use the API to connect an elements gateway to Isilon. And the difference here is the workstation you can see on the left here is the user workstation. They use the Elements client and they log into the Elements gateway. The difference between the Quantum setup and the Isilon setup is that Isilon themselves present the workspace. So the network share comes off Isilon. Whereas if I just go back, I'm just going to go back to the quantum StoreNext setup, you can see that the actual data path is routed through the gateway and the mount itself is from the gateway. It's a physical mount to Media Composer and Premiere Pro. Whereas for Isilon, the actual mount is directly off Isilon. So the reason for saying that is that when we look at solutions ourselves as a media-centric company, we, as our friends at Agora know, we always like to know what codecs are in use, what editing applications are in use, and the number of streams, so that we can identify ourselves the performance requirements of, first of all, the gateways, but also the storage underneath. Now with Isilon, it's a little bit different because the mount is directly connected to Isilon. That will already have been taken care of by either Isilon themselves or the integrators, including Agora, actually supplying those systems. So we connect to Isilon via the API in this example here. So in terms of functionality, both Quantum and Isilon basically now have the ability to create and manage Elements workspaces on the storage via the Elements client. And that's probably when we have feedback from customers, that's probably the first reaction to people on how easy the client is to use. The workspaces are all permissions based or group based on, let's say, editors and production managers, and they're very easy to configure. So you could have contractors coming in and out, or in the case of FAMU and or other kind of colleges, you can switch in and out students and year groups, and you can via Active Directory, and you can control that in the background very nicely. And the user experience is very efficient. So if you, for example, close your machine down at the end of the day, and when you start your machine up the next day, you launch the Elements clients, and it can remember the workspaces you've worked on. It can automatically mount them, or it will just show them to you, and you can just click to mount them. So very easy to access the storage without having to remember paths or be IT centric at all. But that's probably only about a fifth of the story, but it is the feedback that we get straight off. And that is the simplified and user-friendly share management. But also all the third-party storage that we connect to, so that's both StoreNext and Isilon, they have the native Avid bin locking, and particularly for Isilon, that was a big thing that people were asking for. And then the Premiere Pro workflow with Media Library. And then specifically on the Isilon integration, because we're using the API, we can provide automated permission and user creation and quota management actually within Isilon themselves. So I'm now going to talk about Element Satellite. So Element Satellite is our remote desktop solution. So people will be fairly familiar with remote desktop solutions, even if they don't know its name. So applications like TeamViewer or the HP equivalent, all the IT-centric remote desktop solutions are available. But we designed one specifically for media and entertainment. The year before last, we did a report on all of the different remote desktop solutions, and we found that for media and entertainment, there wasn't really anything that was essentially software orientated, although you'll see that we're not quite software orientated, but basically something that most of our customers can use out of the box. And so in terms of Element Satellite, the first thing is that it can operate at very high frame rates, up to 60 frames per second, and it provides super low latency, and I'll explain why that is in a minute. So the main reason why this is different is because we use GPU based streaming technology. So we use the GPU of the on-site workstation. And most of our customers, not all, but most of our customers have got workstations that have the correct level of GPU required, that basically gives you H.264 hardware encoding. And we can push out a 4K screen within 5 milliseconds onto the internet, which is extremely rapid. And we can do that by using the GPU that's already based in the workstation itself. So even though ours is a software only solution, we're using the hardware GPU of that on-premise workstation. We're also using the UDP protocol. We're not using VPN. We have a very high level of encryption because we're not using VPN, and because we're using the UDP protocol, again, that's very, very much more efficient than relying on the VPN and the TCP/IP stacks that break up packets and generally don't give you a good experience. So in other words, the quality of the experience depends mostly on whatever else is in that network connection in terms of latency. And if you have got a 10 megabit connection at home, then you can generally edit very comfortably. And if you have a 30 megabit connection over your, we don't necessarily recommend wireless. If you've got a hard connection to your router, that would be great. But I've edited here from London to Copenhagen with the workstation running Resolve in Copenhagen at 4K, and I have a large monitor next to me, and it felt like I was editing. It's a very much point and click, and it's a very immersive experience. So a few use case examples for editing for remote desktop. So the obvious one is working from home. So anyone can connect, that's allowed to, can connect to an on-site workstation. Now, because the on-site workstation is already in a facility and already designed to do real-time edit, it has everything you need to do that. So being able to connect to it from home is obviously very useful. You don't need to concern yourself about anything else that you need. You can use a standard laptop at home that runs a browser, to do that. So you're controlling the whole workstation. So you're working with all the applications that are on there. And the main advantage is that you don't need to move around large assets, because the assets are connected generally to that on-premise workstation, generally through shared storage. And you don't either need proxy workflows, which is the other way that certainly we would handle it using the media library if we didn't have the remote desktop. And we can use both. So you can connect via the media library via the URL, and you can have a proxy-based workflow without needing to touch raw assets. But if you want to, you can download those assets. But we also have satellite, where we can control the workstation directly. The other thing about satellite is that in terms of licensing, you actually pay for the number of shared workstations. So you could have, for example, 5 shared workstations on premise, and you could have 20, 30, 100 users connected at any point in time to those 5 shared workstations, and you wouldn't be paying for those 100 users. You'd only be paying for the 5 shared workstations. Another example is remote editors. So in this global world, editors could be anywhere. And there's obviously different price points for different editors in different countries. And as long as they can remote in and do the work that you need to, then that's a perfectly kind of acceptable way of working now. And So for example, you could have your infrastructure. I've got London here, but clearly you could have your infrastructure in Hungary or Czechoslovakia, and you could have your remote editors dotted around, or they could be students as well. So I've got a demonstration link here that I'm going to run up just to show you, and I don't think you can hear the audio, so I will tell you what's going on. So first of all, we've got a we're running DaVinci Resolve, and we're 500 miles away between Düsseldorf and Copenhagen. Network latency is about 40 milliseconds. We're using a Wi-Fi connection, and we're operating in ProRes 4444 at 4K. This is the Elements client, and this is Philippe logging in. You can see he's got a nice avatar, and he's selecting the desktop part of our interface. And we've got 2 shared workstations available to us, and we can choose to share our own one at the bottom right there if we want to. We're going to select the bottom one, and we're now authenticating with that on-premise workstation. We're sitting at the remote desktop at the moment, and at the remote. And this is now the authentication, and then we maximize the screen, and we are now looking directly at the on-premise workstation. You can see that we're just bringing up and showing that we're sharing here, and just wait for my internet connection, which is my own internet connection, which is on the slow side. Hopefully that should pick up. And while it's doing that, so we're looking at DaVinci Resolve, we're looking at a 4K image, and hopefully you can still hear me as well whilst I'm running this up. I'm going to rerun that and see if I can run that. I'll just refresh my screen and that should come up. Okay, so okay, so we go. So we're now doing a an edit, and he says, I'll give this just one more go, and if it runs, that's great. If it doesn't, then I'll move on to the next part. But basically, we're just showing the metrics of the connection here, and we're now editing directly in Resolve. So we're just showing the actual resolution of the clip itself. So that's 4K ProRes 444, and we're running an audio and video synchronization test. You won't be able to hear the audio, but when you play this, and I can certainly provide the links afterwards, there is no discernible lag between the audio and the video. It happens at exactly the same time. And that's because we create the stream at the GPU itself. So we're not reliant on the internet holding those different audio and video streams. You can now see that we are running the 4K, and you can hopefully see that it's super smooth. So hopefully you can see that it's super smooth, and we're scrubbing backwards and forwards. And that scrub is basically a point and happen. So you can see that operating like that. And now we're just editing. So we're doing some rough cuts here, and we're using the application exactly as you would expect. And you can see that the transition happens exactly as you would expect. We can also control the whole computer as well. So we're going into the Explorer here, and just navigating, moving content around, and this is where you can also access the shared storage. Super. So that was the satellite demo, and I'm now going to move on to the actual demonstration of our media library, and which you should see very shortly as well. This will just take a couple of minutes to, or hopefully less, just a few seconds to come up, and then I can show you it. So the first thing that we do is we log into the system. I'm logged into root at the moment, and I'm going to show you the Elements client that we were talking about earlier. So I log in, and we see all the workspaces that we're entitled to see. If I wanted to use Elements Satellite, I would press the desktop button here, and by pressing the desktop button, I can see the workstation I'm entitled to share. This is actually my own, so I won't click it, but if I was to click it, I would be controlling that workstation. And here we've got all of our productions, and if you're familiar with Avid, then you'll be familiar with the concept of productions and workspaces. So the production is the top level, and of all of our workspaces, which essentially are our projects mounted underneath. So I'm going to select my, under media here, I'm going to select London, and you'll see that our workspace is now mounted here in the, I'm running a Mac, so it's mounted in the Finder as Media London, and you can see this is all of our content. So this is as if this is either on our own storage, or it would be connected to either Quantum Store Next environment or Isilon. So that this is how you would access your different workspaces. Now, if I now switch to the media library, I'm going to go straight into the media library here, which is this bottom left, and I'm going to select the Media Workspace London. And we've got what's called a media route, which actually points to the same part on the storage. And you can see it's a far richer interface. You can see that I can scrub up and down into the different assets. And it's a window on the storage, so I didn't have to copy or move anything. I'm just looking at it. And you can see here that, for example, we've got some various status flags. So this one here is a system icon that's telling us that actually the asset is no longer on the storage itself. Even though the proxy is here, we've removed it. So if I went to look into my Finder, I wouldn't find Freestyle, the name of the file name here, because it's no longer on the storage. It is in fact in the cloud. That's why we have the cloud icon, and it can be retrieved as well. So I could, for example, run a job by selecting this. I could bring it back, and I've got an archive to cloud, which is how it went there, and I could restore it from the cloud, for example. And that's now being brought back. You can see that the jobs are being run, and there's also a client notification on the top here as well, that also tells us and can tell any other user. And you can see now that this Freestyle no longer has the waste bin, and also we've removed, as part of our workflow that we configured, the cloud icon because it's on our storage. And that could be on Quantum storage, or it could be on Isilon storage as well. And if we went into our Finder, we would find Freestyle here is now available on our storage, whereas previously effectively it was deleted. So that's just a real quick example. I'm now going to go into kind of other aspects of the media library. So I've got a clip here, and I'm running the proxy here, not the raw asset. So the proxy gets created automatically, and I can basically, I'm using my keyboard keys 1, 2, 3, 4, which will hopefully be familiar with from an editing perspective. So you can use all your standard editing keys to navigate the clip, or you can just scrub up and down really quickly. And you can put a comment on the timeline. So I could put a comment here, and I'm going to draw on it. I'm going to say that I want the mouth to be recolored, for example, like so. And I could actually assign that to a user. So I could assign it to Mark the editor, or we might have a new contract editor that's just arrived, and I could apply that to that person, post it, And that now is applied to that contract editor. And when that contract editor logs in, they will then see that they have a task. And in fact, when they go into the media library, it will automatically switch to the unresolved tasks menu, and they will see that they have to basically recolor it, and that's a comment on the timeline. And they so it's very unambiguous. They're not having to rely on emails, for example. If they resolve it, then they can mark it as resolved. It then goes into the resolved tasks list, and that's just an example of a very simple workflow. I'm going to go back to this clip. We can also create cuts. So I can create, I've got many different cuts here. You can see one here. I can edit the in-out points here, or I can create a brand new cut just by choosing a part of it, selecting the in, either playing the clip like so, or I could and pressing the out, and you can see the in-out changes, or I could edit the in-outs manually, and I'm just going to put campfire. I've done a few of these, as you can see, so this is probably campfire 4. And these are clips that are saved in the system, basically. We can use those clips by going into a project editor that's actually within this interface. So I've created a projects folder, and it's very easy. You literally just create a directory, and it will create a hard directory on the storage itself. So there are hard links between the media library and the storage. And I could create a brand new sequence, or I could use an existing one. I'm going to use an existing one and edit it. And you can see that we've got various rough cuts here that are actually on the timeline, and we can edit them as we go along. And I could choose a new clip, so I can add subclips, and that's campfire 4 that I've just selected. That's now been added into my subclips, and then within my subclips, I can basically choose them and double click them and add them in. So they're very very easy to edit. So and you could, if I zoom in here, you can also actually change the time, the in-outs actually while you're there. We can now run that up in Premiere Pro. So I'm going to run Premiere Pro in the background. It takes a while to come up, so I will do that towards the end. So I'll bring that up just in the background. So there are a few other areas that could be useful in the media library itself. One is that we can compare assets. So I'm going to go into go into a grade folder. And I've got a couple of grades here, and I can compare them. And I can play them side by side, or I can play them on top of each other like so. And whilst it's running, I can also move the kind of the slider to do basically comparing the two directly. And we've got the same comment timeline on here. So at the bottom, I can say that I prefer this grade. And we can post that. So I've now I have Premiere Pro in the background. So I'm just going to bring this up. And what we're doing here is, this is the Elements Client plugin in the top left. And we've now got effectively a window onto all the different media routes or the media library. So here you can see Media Workspace London. And I can go into my projects folder that I had previously. And I could select AW Project 3 or any of the other projects, but I'm going to do that one. If I can find it. In fact, I think it was new project 3. And so that's now importing the files and also the sequence itself. So if I double click on the sequence now comes in, and this was essentially my rough cut that I can now go backwards and forwards. And I can also play the clip, and you'll basically see this move backwards and forwards. And I'm now basically editing in Premiere Pro itself. And I can choose to edit in either proxy or in raw asset mode. So I can switch between high res, and then I'm actually editing directly on the high res, or I can switch to proxy, and it takes the proxy that we've generated, it goes into the Premiere Pro cache, and we can basically edit on that. So that's the Premiere Pro, and I know I'm going through this very quickly. This is more of a taster, and if you have an interest in this, I'm very happy through Agora to provide this type of demonstration a little bit slower and kind of ask all your questions. So I'm going to go back to our media library and just show you a couple of other areas, and then we can open it out to some questions. So I'm going to go back to our clip that we were on, and at the end here I have a few options. So first of all, I can add tags that I can search on. I can also edit metadata. So I could choose under weather here, I've got a large list, and I could say that it's rain, for example, and I could save that, and I can search for any of that metadata across any of the assets that are in this media route. What I can also do is I can run a workflow here as well. So I've just reset the workflow to the very top, and we're in the current state of initial, and I can choose to reject or approve this asset, and I'm going to approve it. And the current state is now in approved, and anyone can see that that asset is approved. I can also, because I'm now in approved, I have a separate button here called copy to approve folder. So I'm going to press that button, and a physical task is occurring in the background that's actually copying the file into the approved folder. So an example here could be that you had a social media team and you wanted to transcode and copy all at the same time into a folder that the social media team could use. And I'm going to basically now look in the approved folder. And if I go to approved, we can see that we've got a copy of the asset itself actually in the approved folder. And that folder could be anywhere within the system. Now, I'm going to go into the admin part of the media library. And first of all, I'm going to show you how easy it is to set up that workflow. So we created an approved, a rejected, and an approved folder, 3 different statuses. And then the buttons we pressed were here, the approve and the copy to approve. And then I had a few others to get me back to the start. And these are basically states and transitions in the system. And the most interesting one was the copy to approve folder. And you can see that we have, this is our automation engine where we can basically create new jobs from a list. So we can do an awful lot within the system, including copying content, doing rsyncs, even creating custom shells and Python scripts if we wanted to. But most of what can be brought up to the from the command line up to this browser interface we've already done. We can send messages to Slack, email, etc. And the one we did was copy files. So if I select copy files, you can see it's a simple form that allows you to have a variable input, which was the selected file, and for it to go somewhere. And in this case, it went to the approved folder. And then we can apply permissions and all sorts of stuff to that and the way it works. That's a real quick kind of overview of the automation engine itself. And then other areas that we can do within the media library. We can choose the permissions that people have, so we can have different permissions for editors, production management, and reviewers. So for example, the reviewers are only allowed to write metadata and add comments. Basically, they can download proxies, and they would have a far simpler interface, so they wouldn't see any of this on the left-hand side, for example. And you would literally just set this up for editors, production management, and you could link all of this into Active Directory. And then the last area that I was going to show was the way an operator admin, someone who's like an editor but been promoted to have to look after the storage. They don't have to be particularly IT literate. They can literally create the productions within this interface. And we were operating within the media production, and then you create your workspaces, which are the projects that you mount, and we were using the one called London. And this is where you would set the permissions up of that workspace. So you can see there's a complete list here. And if I wanted to add someone, I could add, I've only got a few left, but I would add the users that are left in the system to this particular workspace. And you can see here that there's a production management group and an editors group. So you can add groups as well, and those groups can be synced to Active Directory. And then you have the users themselves. So you can create users very easily. We've got loads of users here, and these are the groups the users are in. So we've got an editors group with Mark, the editor, and a new contract editor. And we could add, again, someone else. We could add a new contractor, for example, and then select that, and they would be added in very easily. So it's very easy to add people in and out on an ongoing basis. So that is a really quick demonstration. So hopefully that's given you a good taste as to what we do, but I'm very happy to answer any questions in the background that you may have.
Okay. Tak já využiju téhle chvíle, jestli máte nějaké dotazy. Podívám se, jestli je někdo psal, nepsal. Podíváme se. Alistair se nám úplně se nám vypojil. A co je důležité zmínit? Sedíme na FAMU, tady na FAMU je Elements instalovaný, instaloval ho tady Agora. Elements se sem dostal po poměrně důrazném vyzkoušení a ověření spousty věcí a na tom si zakládáme, abychom skutečně dělali věci, které jsou dobré a které mají svůj smysl. Před chvílí jsme se bavili o tom s kolegy, že nejenom pro školy, jako je FAMU a JAMU, jsou tyto systémy a nějaké další školy potřebné, ale skutečně pro každou organizaci, kde vzniká mediální obsah. Jakýkoliv multimediální obsah. Protože v textu znáte Ctrl+F, a případně Ctrl cizí, Ctrl vlastní, můžete to množit a dělat s tím, co potřebujete. Ve videu už to tak jednoduché není, ani v tom obrazovém materiálu. Přitom jeden obrázek řekne více než 1000 slov. Například teď, když se díváte, tak nevím, jestli to vidíte, my tady od rána neustále vylepšujeme tenhle prostor. V každé té změně to vypadá tady jinak. No a vaše otázky pořád nepřišly, tady se dívám.